Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on cultivating resilience and positive mental health in job searches. Thank you so much to all of you for joining today. It would be really good if participants could introduce themselves in the chat and let us know where you're based. If you have any questions throughout the session, you can use the Q&A function and our speakers will have a chance to answer questions at the end. So at this point, we'd like to show appreciation to the Commonwealth Secretariat for their role in making this webinar possible. The Year of Youth is running from 2023 to 2024, and the Commonwealth is celebrating by running a programme of initiatives to address global issues facing young people, such as climate change, gender inequality, and unemployment, to name a few. This webinar is the first in a three-part series that's dedicated to empowering young people. And today's session is aimed at young professionals across the Commonwealth. However, people at other stages of their career are welcome and hopefully will pick up some other tools as well. So to do some introductions, my name is Charlotte and I'm here to represent the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, or IOSH, who are the chartered body for safety and health professionals globally. We are a charity that have a simple vision, which is a safe and healthy world of work for everyone. IOSH is also one of the 89 accredited organisations of the Commonwealth. We believe that every person deserves to go home from work at the end of the day and be both physically and mentally safe and well. So my role today will be facilitating the session, and I'm privileged to be joined by two speakers today, both based in different Commonwealth countries. So the first person we have joining us today is Alina Danulal, who is based in Trinidad. Alina identifies as a younger safety and health professional with 8 years experience in industries such as education, retail, paint and beverage manufacturing within Trinidad, to name a few. She is currently a health and safety officer and is a very active volunteer in her local community and with IOSH, and she's very passionate about mental health, well-being, etc. We also have Dr. David Arku, who wears many different hats. He is a safety and health professional, a trainer, consultant, and he is our IOSH Vice President. He has over 8 years experience in workplace safety and health with medical experience across Ghana that is too long to explain in this short webinar. He focuses on safety and environmental sustainability in the mining, oil, gas and healthcare sectors. And thank you both so much for joining us today. So what are we going to cover in the session today? First of all, we'll be looking at some definitions. So what do we mean by mental health and resilience? And we'll look at how job searches can impact on these things. We'll also go over some tools and techniques to improve resilience and to facilitate good mental health. And Alina and David will be giving us some of their personal experiences and insights. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So we thought it's very important at this point to provide some context on what we mean by mental health and resilience, as people often define them in different ways and it can get confusing. So I'll now hand over to Alina, who's kindly going to provide us with some definitions, and then she'll lead into her section of this webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Charlotte, and greetings from the Caribbean, everyone. So mental health, the World Health Organization, we could go to the other slide. Yeah, the World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stressors of life and contribute to their community. It continues to say that it is an integral component of health and well-being that underpins our individual abilities to make decisions, build relationships, and shape the world that we live in. So from this definition, I pretty much gather that mental health is fluid. It varies on any given day, and that maintenance of that state of mind is what allows us to cope with the day-to-day challenges that may come in a pretty consistent manner, right? And moving on, we can move on to resilience that offspins from mental health. And the American Psychological Association defines resilience as the process of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences. A number of factors contribute to resilience, including the way in which individuals view and engage with the world, the availability and quality of resources, and specific coping strategies. So resilience pretty much hones in on the coping mechanism that is defined in mental health. And I see it as a mechanism by which mental health could be described as fluid. Okay. So moving right along, and it would be great with the participants that we have online to just type into the chat, and Charlotte can help me with that. So what are your thoughts on what factors can impact our mental health and well-being? We have some prompting images on the screen, and we'd really like to hear. Okay, I'm seeing stress popping up. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Financial, toxic environments. Yeah. Workload, definitely. Yeah. So thank you all so much, family life. Yeah. Great. Realistic deadlines. I agree. Disability. Yeah. Right. Great. Thanks so much for that. Um, so if we move on to the next slide, we could probably, hone into yeah, work-life balance, beliefs, mental health. Yeah, mental health diagnoses for sure. So, I mean, family life, not only family, but like issues with relationships. We think about issues that we have with spouses, with our friendships, our kids, issues on the job, you all mentioned, workload, deadlines. We may have tough managers or bosses that we deal with. The very work environment itself may be toxic. We may have long work hours. We may work in shift environments. That definitely contributes. What about health? Some of us may be dealing with chronic pain. We may have pre-existing medical conditions that contribute to our overall well-being and mental health by extension. We may have injuries that we're recovering from. We may have had a new medical diagnosis that we're treating with. And we may be on medication that we have some side effects of. I'm so happy that we're dealing with career, because this webinar deals with that specific factor with job search or perhaps job transitioning. Not mentioned on the slide. What about our past? Some of us have trauma. Some of us have been through abuse that really shapes our mental outlook. And some of us may have actual diagnosed mental health conditions that also contribute to our baseline mental health, right? So as I like to see it, we are all a combination of some degree of all of these contributing factors that, our states of mental well-being, right? Pretty much, right? So moving along, right? So the job search and that the impact that it has on our mental health and well-being. I think within the last 5 years or more, the job search has been time consuming, very high pressured, and by high pressured, in my experience, I've seen it as very competitive. And I think these two factors contribute to anxiety, and anxiety sometimes is met by anticipation. You just have this ongoing anticipation and this feeling of you sometimes have no closure in the job search. And overall, I think these three factors contributes to it being just a general stressful experience in the human condition, right? So if we move along. Right. So why? The big why. Why is it important to look after our mental health and well-being? Right. And we see the word proactive being highlighted. Being proactive and looking after your mental health and well-being can improve your resilience. Being proactive, I think, means that you need to do some introspection, observe yourself. Some signs and symptoms that your mental health could be adversely affected. Do you have a short fuse? Um, Perhaps you avoid certain types of conversations. Um, you just don't have the zeal to do normal everyday activities, even essential everyday activities. These could all be warning signs that you probably need to take a step back, or they could be signs that your mental health is at risk of escalating into something that is undesirable. Um, so another importance is it can reduce your overall stress, and this is especially important during job searches, all right? To pay attention to your state of mind during the process of looking for a new job or pivoting your career, right? So I would say that if resilience is built into your job searching process or your job searching period of time, um, the hope is overall that your mental health could be maintained. So what I mean by that is if you control or this contributing factor that we've already established contributes to your mental health and well-being, overall, it should be a more pleasant experience for you, right? Right. So my experience. I'm so happy for the opportunity to talk about this because um prior to this, I um sorry, 1 second. Sorry, is my volume okay now? Okay, I'll continue. Great, thank you. Um, right, so my experience, I think it's not unique to me. And I think it's a global issue that a lot of individuals face. I'm a millennial. I think a lot of millennials are going through this issue right now. So a little bit about me. Back in 2007 to about 2011, I went to Jamaica to study geology because I live in a country that is supposed to have opportunities for oil and gas. So I studied that with the expectation of returning home to be a geologist. When I came home, suffice it to say, up to this point, I have never worked as a geologist in my life, right? So when I came home, I think that was my first aha moment. I will not lie to say that I was disappointed because up to that point, um, everyone, thought it was a good idea and a good move at the time. So I quickly had to learn to pivot and I quickly learned about persistence. So eventually I did get a job within the government service, and it was the job had to do with land leases. The state has tenants of land, and we were processing these tenants, right? And it was at that point in time that I did my level 3 NEBOSH in an effort to pivot my career. And one of the reasons was I realized at that point in time that fields such as HSE, finance, and IT probably would be a open door for me to work in different organizations as opposed to geology. I would be geographically limited within the country and limited in my pool of employers. All right. So that was one of the reasons why I decided to pivot, and then decided that I liked it also. Um, After that, I got the opportunity to work as a health and safety assistant at our country's National Science Center, which essentially is a branch of our Ministry of Education that promotes STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. And it was quite fun. There was no formalized structure for even having a health and safety person. So I worked contract after contract until they discontinued the contract. And that was my first real taste, I think, of unemployment. And because the contract ended. So I was in the job market for 3 months until a colleague of mine mentioned to me that she was leaving a retail distributor locally. And she submitted my information to the HR department, and I was interviewed amongst the pool of candidates, and I was successful. Now, I was very, very young in the field, and it was a big jump for me, jumping into a multi-site sort of environment and being the lone safety officer, right? So it was a steep learning curve for about a year. And I dealt with a lot of things, mentally, imposter syndrome, working with a larger organization, all of those things that did contribute to my growth and development, but it was becoming a little too much. And I took the decision, I think at the end of 2019, to leave the organization. My backup plan at the time was to work on projects as a freelancer, but not knowing that in 2020 onward, we would have a global health phenomenon that impacted a lot of the world's runnings. And it was also part of I guess my learning experience, because I think that point in time I did get the opportunity to work for myself, and it was great. The only downside to it was the income was not as consistent, so I was forced to do the whole job search. But the job search during the pandemic time was very, very difficult, to say the least. And I think at that point in time, mentally, it started to take its toll. And the ways it did that were, there were some jobs that I had higher anticipation and hopes for. And I think HR departments in various organizations were also under pressure, because they were also dealing with retrenchment and other things that, getting back to a candidate was near impossible. So not hearing back from a lot of interviews, applications, was taking its toll on me, which I'm sure a lot of you all could relate to. So I mean, there was a point in time where I felt like it's not making any sense to send any more applications, because you're not seeing any return for your efforts. Needless to say, in a 3-year period, I probably had about 5 interviews at most. So it was very, very difficult. But coming out of it, I somehow found the strength to keep sending applications. And again, as things started to pick up, I got referred again to a vacancy at the company that I'm at now, and was successful in the interview, and it turned out for the better. So there is, merit to persistence. It is hard. I mean, sometimes if it's really taking a toll, I would recommend just take a step back, but you can't give up. Sometimes it may mean a change in your approach, but by and large, I think having a plan, like at least, or setting a goal, is very important. Every week you send out at least 5 applications, check back on the application. Sometimes those are dead ends. You call a number and you could be put on hold for a long time. But I think not giving up, as cliche as that sounds, is perhaps my best advice for tackling this challenge. But again, you have to have a support system around you, and you have to also observe yourself as to how you perceive some of the things that you're applying for. Have a healthy expectation. I think sometimes you really think, or sometimes you would have gone into an interview and you are very confident when you come out of it, only for months to pass by and you never hear anything after an interview. That could really be a hard blow. So know what to expect. This, I think, is part of the process, and I think talking about it helps. You're not alone in it. And yeah, that's pretty much my experience. I don't know if it raises some questions later on.
All right, thank you, Alina. That was a beautiful story. Hi everyone, I'm David. Similar to what Alina has been through, for the past few years, I have applied to a lot of jobs, a lot. And I'll be honest with you, most of them didn't work out. Some jobs you apply to and you realize that nobody's going to see the application. Sometimes you drop it at an office and you know that it's going to be stuck there at the front desk. It's discouraging. It makes you start to question your self-worth. You start to ask yourself, are you as good as you think you are? Because if you are, why is no one hiring you? It can really beat you down. It can really, really make you sad. But I'll tell you to keep on hoping. When I reflect back, I realized that it was actually for my good that I didn't get a lot of the jobs I applied for. I realized that if I had been in some of those jobs, it would have greatly, greatly limited my growth, and I wouldn't be where I am today. So I'd like to encourage you all that sometimes things may seem not to be working out for you, but one day you step back and look at the broader picture and you realize that, oh, this was actually good for me. It can be very stressful, I must admit, very, very stressful. And we all have dreams and hopes. We have this big picture in our mind of where we imagine we'll be when we are 35, when we are 45, when we are 50. And as these things don't go well, you start to worry, am I going to achieve my goals? Should I give up? One of the tools I use is what they call the serenity prayer. To summarize it, you're basically looking inside and focusing on things you can change. There are lots of things in the world you cannot change. Focus on what you can change. I also focus on looking at each setback as a stepping stone. So I imagine myself as standing on the ground, trying to jump up to reach that goal, jumping up, and I can't reach that goal. But every setback that comes, I step on it and then rise higher and higher. My very first interview I ever had for a job was a disaster because I was inexperienced in interviews. I was not prepared. But because of that interview, now I can go to an interview and be confident. So approach each setback as what it is, a good lesson. Don't let it beat you down. Next slide, please. So resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And we have to be realistic. Setbacks will come. There's nothing anyone can do about it. Nothing will ever go perfectly. So our minds shouldn't be focused on how do we not face setbacks, but for the inevitable setbacks that do come, how do we overcome them? Stress really comes when you feel like you don't have the resources to deal with the challenges that are before you. And therefore, resilience is about building those resources to help you deal with the challenges that will come, whether you like them or not. it's not a one size fits all thing. One thing works for one person, another thing works for another person. You need to find out what works for you. For somebody, it might be taking a walk in nature. It calms them, recharges the battery. For somebody, it's sitting behind the TV and watching something just to distract yourself. For somebody, it's picking up the phone and speaking to a friend about a totally unrelated subject to distract yourself. Find what works for you, what builds your resilience. Next slide, please. So I want you to remember this definition of resilience: advancing despite adversity. Not that you don't expect adversity to come, but the fact that despite that adversity, you advance. Next slide, please. So some look at resilience as having 6 domains. I'll just touch on some of them. For example, under composure, regulating your emotions. There's a term called catastrophizing. We tend to look at something as worse than it is. So we go for a job interview, we fumble, we don't answer the questions well. You can feel like your world has ended. This is the end of your career. You're never going to be able to feed yourself. You're going to end up a bum on the street. No, that is catastrophizing. We need to be able to take a step back and realize that, oh, it's not the end of the world. What can I learn from this? Look after your health. Good sleep makes a world of difference. Sometimes you sleep and wake up and realize that, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Eat well, exercise. And exercise doesn't mean you have to go and hit the gym and then go and lift weights or run on a treadmill. It can be something you like doing, like dancing. It could be swimming. It could be taking a walk. Just get your body active. And tenacity is so important. It means that you are going to tell yourself that you are not going to give up. No matter the challenges that come up, I am going to bounce back because I have a goal and I'm going to reach it. Oftentimes, just telling yourself this over and over again, I'm not going to give up, keeps you pushing and pushing. And trust me, one day you will get where you're going. And never forget about your support networks. Your support network, you would know what's best for you. For some, it's family. And for some, family is the worst place to go for support. For some, it's friends. For some, it's your work best friend. Find somebody or people who you can lean on. Those people will celebrate with you in the good times. Like you got the promotion, you got the job, let's celebrate. And they're also a great shoulder to cry on when things don't go well. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to delve into some key tips in what to do during their job searches. And I'm going to break it down into 3 parts. During the job search, during the interview or assessment day, and after the interview. During the job search, prepare. Prepare when you're writing your application for a job. Job applications should be tailored to the position that you are applying for. Don't get a generic CV, generic cover letter, and just send it across board as if you are just throwing them in the air. Find out what that job wants and tailor your CV, tailor the cover letter to show that you have put effort into the research. Get support from your support network. It's necessary sometimes. You need that boost. You need that encouragement. Absolutely take breaks and rest because you are more productive when you're rested. If you've been applying for jobs for hours, take a break, just rest, relax, do something you enjoy, take a walk, watch a movie. You do realize that as you come back, you are refreshed because you have recharged that battery. And set realistic goals and expectations. We all know ourselves. We all know what we can do and what we can do. When you are setting your goals, keep in mind who you are and what your capabilities are, so that if you know that it may take you 3 hours to freshen up your CV, allow time for that. If you are a chronic procrastinator and it might take you 3 days, make time for it. Next slide, please. The day of the interview, oof. can be tough. You feel your heart beating, your heart is pounding. You need to be able to calm down. Before you go, eat a good meal. You don't want your hands shaking because you're starving. Stay hydrated. Being hydrated helps you to speak better because then your vocal cords are well hydrated. Plan ahead. Make room for traffic. Make room for an accident on the highway. Make room for your car breaking down. Just make sure that you're not arriving there at the last minute, sweating and having a puffing because that interview will not go well. Focus on your breathing. A trick I practice is I take a deep breath through my nose and then hold it in my chest and then breathe out. Take another deep breath through my nose, hold it in my chest, breathe out. It really calms me. And I suggest that you try it too. And sometimes if it will help you, take a walk before the interview starts. It might calm you down enough to be able to deliver because you are competent enough to get that job. Next slide, please. After an interview, despite how it goes, whether it goes perfectly, whether there were setbacks, whether you just don't know, allow time for you to reflect. It might help to journal this, write it down, either with a pen and paper, on your phone, on your laptop. This reflection of what went well, what went wrong, what you should have done, will act as a guide for the future so that you can now build on your past experiences to make yourself better and better. And one day it will pay off. Plan to do something you like. You've done hard work, you've earned a break. Something I like to say is work hard, party hard. So after you've done that hard work, do what makes you happy. Sit in front of the TV with your feet up, have a snack or two, distract yourself, speak to your family and friends, get encouragement from them. You may want to take time away from your emails because if you are on your phone and your emails, you're checking it every 2 seconds to have an email. Then when you get a message from somebody, you get so frustrated because that's not the message you want. Take some time away. Exercise, as I've said, and please do get some rest. Next slide, please. So on the screen, there are some resources that can help you greatly. Here, I must give a disclaimer that IOSH doesn't have any relationship with any of these. These are just things that we found useful for you. So Headspace is a guided meditation app. It will help you to stay calm throughout the process. Calm is another app you can freely download that should help you with your sleep because sometimes that anxiety will keep you awake. The thoughts will intrude. You will worry. You keep, as soon as you're falling asleep, then you wake up and remember, oh my goodness, I should have sent this in my application. Oh my goodness, I should have sent this in my interview. The Mind website is a great resource. You can get everything from stress management to how to exercise to mindfulness. And the Open University has this great 24-hour course. You don't have to sit down for 24 hours and do it at a go. You can do it in bits at your own time. But it helps you to be able to develop career resilience. Next slide, please. Now, remember that it's a strength and not a weakness to look for support. We often feel like we should be able to shoulder our burdens ourselves, but it takes a truly strong person to look for support when you need it. So be proactive about it. Go out and look for the support. Go out and reach out to that friend and tell them that I am struggling. This job search has been frustrating. I've been searching for a job for a year. I'm feeling like I'm not worth it. You need that support. Go out and search for it. Find a mentor to support you. It really helps. A mentor can tell you that, look, I've been through this as well. This and this is what I used to help me. Sometimes when we realize that we are not, our journey is not that unique, our failures are not that unique, it can encourage us, keep us pushing, especially when you see where that person is currently. You can join a relevant professional body, and I would recommend IOSH. IOSH has a mentorship program where you can join up to the program and get a mentor. You can get a mentor who is in your field, who has been through what you've been through, who can help you through this process. And network with your fellow young professionals. Talk to them, find out what has helped them, what are their tips, and you can share your experiences and you can really gain from this. So my top 2 tips, and because I don't want to talk too much, is 1, stay connected. Stay connected. Do not make this journey alone. You need the support and rely on that support network. Remember, it is a strength to seek support. And my second tip is sleep enough. A storm looks less daunting after you've had a good night of sleep. When you are down, when you're feeling like the world is against you, get some sleep. When you wake up fresh, alive, and ready to face life again.
Thank you so much, David. My top tips would be, if you are coming out of school, say A-levels, ensure your bases are covered educationally. I would recommend doing a technical field as your next step in your education and building your skills base. And right after that, perhaps get your feet into the door, sending as much applications as you can. Of course, taking David's advice with pacing yourself and ensuring that you do tailor them, because you want to give yourself the best chance as possible in the face of a recruiter. So get your feet through the door. It may be a baseline position, but apply to companies where you think that there's room for growth. A mentor could help you streamline which companies to target based on vacancies that may come up. And then perhaps from there, work your way up with experience, with promotion. Most organizations are open to those things. Have a discussion in the interview process when there is a question and answer session in an interview. Ask, is there any room for growth for me? Seek yourself, advocate for yourself in interviews also. And then once you've been promoted, your education doesn't stop there. You could backfill your education based on the roles that you are growing in. And by then you would probably have decided on a career path, and your education could complement your experience. So yeah, those are my tips.
Thank you both, David and Alina, for sharing your experiences and giving those really practical tips. I think it's really easy for people to feel lonely, as you've said. So I was really grateful to hear you both remind attendees that they are not alone. I think a lot of the advice that you give, it's very easy for us to give others advice in our lives, and taking it on board ourselves can be quite difficult. So seeing it all laid out is a really helpful way of reminding yourself of all the different things you could do to sort of help yourself through this difficult process. So we're going to go over to question and answer now, and I'll be referring both to the Q&A box and also from some pre-submitted questions. The first one that I think is a really good question is, do job searches and interviews get easier the more you do, or am I always going to feel anxious when interviewing for a new job? I'll go to Alina first and then to David.
I think yes and no. That's, I think, the novelty with the job search and the whole interview process. In my experience, I think the nervousness gets a little less every time. I don't want to think that I'm getting more comfortable with it. But yeah, I think practice also makes perfect. You learn how to market yourself, and your confidence also improves with the interview process. So in my experience, yes and no. I still get nervous, but it's not as bad every time. Yeah.
That's true. And David?
So yeah, I would say yes, it does get easier. The first few times you get nervous, you make mistakes, but each mistake serves as a lesson, and then you grow and grow and grow. It's never going to be so easy as you're going to walk into an interview and feel like, oh, this is yours. You're always going to be a bit nervous. But what you learn to do is to be able to talk about that nervousness. You're going to be able to put that nervousness aside and then perform. and then come out and be like, whew, that was not easy. But I would encourage you that each time, learn from it. It will become more and more easier to deal with, even though overall it's not easier, but you have more resources at your beck and call to be able to overcome the challenges.
They're great points. And I think, yeah, you've both touched on practice makes perfect. And I think the more that you expose yourself to things that are scary, the less scary that they become over time, 100%. So another question for you both is, what sort of things have you done to become more resilient in the workplace? Have you got any particular stories or examples you'd like to give? I'll open that up to both of you.
Okay, so my top resilience tool is the Serenity Prayer. Every time I go into a different workplace, there are frustrations. I mean, everywhere. There is not one single job or workplace I've gone to where there are no challenges. It just does not exist. The challenges are different, but they are there. I have taught myself not to get frustrated by the things I cannot change. There are things in some organizations that you can do absolutely nothing about. Spending 3 hours ranting about it and complaining and being frustrated, it will do nothing for you. Turn your focus to the things you can change and work on those. It may be small things, but trust me, you'll get satisfaction from it and it'll keep you going on.
Yeah, I could add to that. Not taking things personally. Sometimes there are hard conversations that you have to have, whether with your peers or with a superior. And sometimes you have to build resilience in how you respond to that. Because at the end of the day, you still have to deliver on a project or whatever it is, right? Sometimes it's good to observe yourself. If something was said to you, this is how it made me feel, acknowledge that, own that, don't sweep it under the carpet, because again, we spoke about those things in the chats. A lot of you all raised it, where work actually contributes to stress, right? So know what you might be up against. Sometimes it might be a first time that someone has spoken to you harshly, or you would have felt like you were thrown under the bus, so to speak. But also know that these are things to expect. It's not a one-time occurrence, and make up in your mind how you're going to respond to it the next time it happens. Try to formulate a game plan, because this is inherent in the world of work to a certain extent. I mean, if you're being abused, I mean, deal with that accordingly, right? We're not talking about that. We're just talking about the day-to-day things. Have a plan. Yeah.
Really good advice. And I think definitely a strategy I've employed before has been that that in terms of resilience has been sometimes acting the part, pretending to be the person that you want to be, and portraying that confidence even if you don't actually have it. They say dress for the job that you want. You can actually dress in the sort of confidence that you hope to have, if you feel able to do that. So some really good strategies there from both of you. We've touched a little bit on sleep. It's throughout the session, and David, I know you've mentioned the importance of sleep. Do you have any recommendations for people in terms of sleep schedules and the impact that poor sleep can have on mental health and ability to handle stress?
Okay, so when you don't sleep, it stresses your body out. So it then adds on to the stress you're already feeling. Conversely, when you sleep, your body gets to reset. There've been most of you listening could probably think back to a time when you snapped at somebody or you reacted poorly to something just because you hadn't had enough sleep. So sleep is so key. If you go really into the medicine of it, and I'll try not to complicate it too much, sleep does cause damage to your body. And going too long without sleep can actually affect your health. How I help myself sleep, because my life is also very stressful, the personal tip I've had is to use some form of white noise. And I'll explain. Many years ago, I visited a beach and then found the sound of the waves so calming. It was absolutely wonderful to hear the waves just crashing on each other. It was very calming. So before I sleep every night now, I I have an app and then I play the sound of waves on a speaker, and it's so calming and helps me to sleep because thoughts will intrude. There's a lot going on in your mind, and sometimes it can be really difficult to quieten those thoughts. Find what works for you, and it should help.
That's very good advice. And I think it's finding that thing that works for you is a very personal journey. I do know people that use that same tactic, David, and I think it's definitely worth exploring. We've had an interesting question from an anonymous attendee. So they're talking about a scenario, perhaps having a plan and then going for different jobs and those all working out. So now you've had several successful job applications, and now you have to approach that, and you might have an analysis paralysis where you really don't know which one you want to choose, and that can be quite stressful. So what advice would you give to that attendee?
So I could probably take a hit at that. What do you want? Because at the end of the day, go back to what you originally wanted in terms of, I guess, your dream job, or you must have had some criteria in terms of location, working hours, nature of the business, etc. Go back to that. A lot of people would probably fall into the trap of the highest paying. And I mean, money is important, money answers all things, but um go back to what you would have wanted. I'm sure that there's some sort of criteria whether you've actually written it down or not. Again, room for upward mobility. Suppose the one with the highest pay, and you have no room for growth there. Maybe it could be a very, very small company. Maybe there's another organization whereby which it's a multinational and it gives you opportunity for travel, but it's paying a little less probably in that position, but there's room for growth there. So be systematic about it, be practical about it. Look at your life. Are you a mom with small kids? Are your working hours going to be taken away from that very critical part in their life? You have a spouse, you have things to discuss, obviously. But be practical about it is what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Alina. Absolutely. What I like to tell my mentees is draw up a 5-year plan. Like draw up it can be daunting to do, but sit down and write it down. What's your 5-year plan? Now see which of these jobs fits into that 5-year plan. Because trust me, some of those jobs will actually cut that 5-year plan. They'll just stop it in its tracks. And as Alina said, the potential for growth. There are some jobs you might enter and you're going to sit in that same position for years and years with no growth. So I absolutely agree with Alina on this.
Thank you both. And yes, those sort of different points throughout your job search and career are known as sort of trade-offs, these trade-offs of what am I going to accept or what am I not going to accept. And it's really important, as you both say, that you have your priorities in order. We can't predict the future, but we can know in ourselves what is important to us. So I think there were some really good insights from both of you. I think we've probably got time for one more question before we can close the session and give some additional information for attendees. So the final thing that I'll ask you is sort of around networking and professional support. So obviously we've mentioned IOSH today and professional bodies as being a source of support for people who are in the jobs market. So what advice would you give to people in terms of networking with professionals in their area and how that can sort of positively impact the job search and their mental health?
Okay, so in the realistic world, a lot of jobs are through networking. It's a fact. Yes, you can apply to all the jobs, etc. But most of the jobs I've gotten is through networking. So the networking is so key because sometimes you do need somebody to recommend you for that job. Sometimes you do not hear about some jobs unless somebody tells you about them to know to apply. So networking is so key. If you have an aversion to networking, I'll need you to go sit down, take a few breaths, and find the way to start networking. It makes that job search so much easier. So I absolutely recommend networking.
Yeah, I want to add that, especially coming out to the last question, Charlotte. You have a variety of decisions to make because you have various offers. Your network could help you. No, this is not a good fit for you. Yes, this may be a good fit for you. And again, I probably omitted that in my story, but the jobs that I've gotten also have been through networking. But place a healthy expectation on networking. I know the flip side of it is people say, well, I am part of a network, so I expect. It's a fluid thing. Again, right? It helps you, but it doesn't negate the fact that you still have to go through the regular routes of applying and all of these things. So take it. It's very important. It helps you make better choices in terms of career, but have a healthy expectation in your networks also.
Yes, that's really good advice. And I'm sure I know that many people within the network that I'm a part of who do get approached for things like job advice and connections, etc., really appreciate when you want to get to know them as a person and you want to understand their career and you want to show interest in the topic rather than just messaging them and hoping that you can serve a job up for them on a plate, which is incredibly rare. So I think your points around networking being an art and a bit of a process is really important. We've had a couple of questions come in about networking and what it looks like in practice. We will share any questions we've not answered today. We will send some follow-ups after the session to attendees who have asked questions that haven't been answered. But do you have a final note that you'd like to add about networking before we close the session, either David or Alina?
Yeah. During my stint of being in between jobs, networking, I think also helped my mental health. Why do I say that? Because even when I was working as a lone health and safety professional, I didn't really have much health and safety professionals to talk about. So the pressures on the job, I had a pool of people in person because the Caribbean branch, we have face-to-face interaction with our network a lot. That helped me navigate those challenging situations at work because they were people who were facing the same things. Even when transitioning in my career, still being connected to a body of safety professionals was very beneficial, even though my process for landing a job was a little bit longer than I expected. I still felt that I had some sort of worth in the field and in the profession, So definitely it has its benefits, hands down, for me. Yeah.
In terms of practically how to network, the most effective networking in my experience is face-to-face. There's nothing like meeting somebody face-to-face. This can be done, for example, if you are into health and safety, for example, and you hear about a health and safety conference you can attend, absolutely do attend and meet people, shake their hands, speak to them, introduce yourself, exchange contacts. Sometimes it's not always practical to do it in person. So, for example, there's a LinkedIn. Connect with people who have shared interests, people who are in careers that you want to enter into. They will share tips. You may start chatting in the chat box. Practically, what you need to do is just to start a conversation with somebody who is like-minded. So that's practically how I'd say you should network.
Yeah, there's some really good points around networking, and you'll find that with most professions, there are always people who are further up the ladder that, you know, want to extend a hand back down, and finding those people can be really powerful. So as we close the session today, then, just to give you an idea of what you might want to think of after the session today, you can have a think about the tools and techniques that were discussed and decide if any of them will fit your personality type, or you know, what your preferences are. You can think about one technique that you could start to do from today to support your mental health and well-being, and maybe build up from there so that you have a whole suite of techniques. And finally, do follow our social media channels, and look on our websites for information about IOSH and the Commonwealth and how we're engaging in the Year of Youth. And as I mentioned, any questions that we didn't get to today, we will follow up after the session. If you'd like to attend part 2 in the webinar series, then we will be looking at engaging socially sustainable employers and why it's important. The registration link will be shared with everyone after the session, and that will be on the 12th of July. So all that's left to say is thank you so much to David and Alina for coming and sharing your experiences today, and being personal and getting real with the audience. Really do appreciate that. We want to thank the Commonwealth Secretariat again for facilitating this webinar. And finally, I really want to wish luck to all of the attendees on the call, and remind everyone that you all deserve to be safe, happy and healthy at work, and we wish you the best of luck in your job searches. So thank you all, everyone, and have a good rest of the day.